Thanks so much, David. And it's great to be here with you all. I'm looking forward to this. And we're here to talk about leading with wholeness, which emerged out of years of trying to develop civic leaders who are trying to take on really pressing public problems and what's kind of the inner work that folks need to do. So give me a thumbs up. Are you seeing my screen, the leading with wholeness? Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of us here. I wish that we could go around and do a proper introduction, but we only have an hour. We have a bunch to get through. But I always do like to just hear from one or two people, something you hope to get from the session, maybe two folks. Anybody willing to offer a thought? What are you here for?
Max, I'm here because it's you and to learn more about your work and the journey into wholeness, quite frankly, out of our brokenness, I think is essential work. So I'm looking forward to hearing more and learning more about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Deborah. Anybody else feel moved? Somebody else, something you're looking to learn?
Yeah, if Max.
Yeah, I hear you, Michael.
Yeah, no, I mean, don't have a specific thing that I want to learn from you. I just want to learn from you.
Okay. Okay.
And I like the title of the session, and I'm also here for community.
Awesome. Great. Great. Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. So just to get the conversation flowing, just to get us kind of in the headspace here, let's talk. What is wholeness? What does it mean to you? Let's bring that into the room a little bit. Anybody willing to say what this evokes for you? What is wholeness? And I will say, if people want to drop stuff in the chat, feel free. Keep an eye on that. Something to do with wisdom, integration of body, mind, and soul. Love it. Love it. Yeah, let's bring that. Something about integration of our whole selves and wisdom. Let's bring that with us. Inward and outwards. It's like an emergent property. Love it. And how about one more question to get us going? An integration of all roles. Yeah, we're gonna explore that a little bit on our time together. So how about one more question? What is purpose? What is purpose? A word we talk about all the time in leadership. What does it mean to you? Again, no penalties for wrong answers, just getting us focused on what we'll be discussing here. Ooh, being for wholeness. I love it. Love it. The thing we drive towards. Love it. So the reason, right? A sense of call. Love that. So if you look in the dictionary, here's what comes up. Purpose is the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists, or a person's sense of resolve or determination. So themes that came up in our conversation here. But I love the fact there's actually kind of a hidden meaning to the word purpose. It comes from the Greek root per, and you can find the same root in words like purify and purge. Anybody want to guess? What do you think is the kind of hidden meaning of the word purpose? Any guesses out there? Again, no penalties for wrong answers, just getting the juices flowing here. Related to pure. Yeah, well, it's got the same root. So it turns out it means fire. So the hidden root of the word purpose is fire. So it's our inner fire. And this idea that purpose is our inner fire has really become central to the way that I think about leadership development. So over the years of trying to do this work, I've arrived at a couple of key ideas. The first is I always think about leadership as a dual journey. And here's what that means. On the one hand, we do leadership because we want to transform the world around us, right? We dream of a flourishing world. We want to improve our communities and our countries and our worlds. But at the same time that we're engaged in this effort to transform the world around us, there's always this parallel process of transformation in the world within us. And I have just arrived at this understanding that inner and outer change are just too interconnected to separate. Just like those twin strands of the DNA, you literally can't have one without the other. So we need to think about leadership development in a way that helps us honor this interconnectedness that is always there. So over years and years of experimentation and trial and error, I arrived at a model of leadership development that is grounded in this idea of purpose as our flame and also helps us understand how does the inner work relate to the outer work. So it's called the flame, and it's pretty simple visually, but it's got some deep ideas in it. So, it's got 4 elements to it. And the first is organizational culture and values. When you are, that's the handle of the torch. When we're immersed in an organization, we're developed by the culture and values of that organization. And here are my, kind of personal values that I hope you'll feel a little bit during our time together. But being part of Barry Waymiller or whatever organization you're a part of shapes us. The second element I always say is kind of the part of the flame that touches the world around us. And that's whatever we do, action in the world, whatever we wake up and do at our jobs, we are developed by what we work on. But of course, everything we do is influenced by a more internal level, which is what we know. And that's about knowledge and skills and competencies, education, of course, very important stuff. And the fourth and final piece of the model is the B, and that's the inner development, the innermost level of the flame. And that's really about identity, kind of who are we at this deepest level, right? And all of it's important. When I think about leadership development, I think, are we working with all of these 4 dimensions in a thoughtful and integrated kind of way? And I hope, you can see it focuses on fire and really helps us understand how when we cultivate our way of being, it ripples out and shapes the impact that we have on the world around us. So to be really clear today, we're really going to zoom in and focus on the B. We don't have a ton of time together, but our time together is going to be really, can we develop at the B level of the flame? What does that look like? So it's the innermost level, and it's about individual identity. And implicit in this framework is the understanding that everything we do and all that we know is an expression of who we are. It all comes from that innermost place. And here's the thing, who we are right now on this, November 14th, it's just a moment on the journey towards who we might become. We're all just in a process of becoming. And once we arrive at that consciousness, some challenges become clear. We really have to try to stay awake to who we are becoming right now. My God, is there a lot happening in the world? It is hard to be fully present to all of that, right? And we have to stay present to who we aspire to become in the future. So what's our vision for ourselves? We can't just be bounced around like a bag in the wind, right? So I'm here to offer a very sincere invitation. I have learned the hard way. Nobody can ever be compelled or forced to do work at that innermost level of the flame. So all I can offer is a very sincere invitation. And it's an invitation to undertake an inner journey of exploration, growth, and insight. That is what development at the B level of the flame is about. And we're going to talk a lot about this idea of a journey. We're going to go pretty deep into that, but just to give you a high-level overview. Any Joseph Campbell fans in the house? Anybody who's yeah, a few hands are up in this crowd. That's great. So some folks know he's a comparative mythologist. He studied myths told all around the world, from caveman times up to modern Hollywood blockbusters. And his kind of big contribution was seeing that underneath all these seemingly very different stories was this underlying pattern. And the fact that it's so universal means this must be a process we all have to go through to achieve our full potential. And at its most basic, it's got 3 stages. So it always begins with a departure. You're in some familiar, ordinary world, and you cross a threshold into something you don't fully understand. And that is when you encounter the road of trials. And we are really tested and challenged by confronting these challenges. But we also learn a lot. We get gifts from our struggles. So the journey never ends with the metaphorical slaying of the dragon. There's always a final stage, which is where we return and we find some way to use the gifts and insights of the things we've gone through to be of service to others. So it's this really simple yet profound kind of way of understanding life and leadership. And I invite you to try it on for our hour together. Make sense? And I can only illuminate the path here. We have an hour together. We've got 2 exercises we're going to do, but with this kind of work, only you can choose to take this kind of journey. So you'll get out of it what you put into it. Cool. Are folks ready to give it a try? Take a first step? Yes. Okay. Well, here's where it always begins. And for you folks, it wouldn't be surprised if this is something you've done before, in which case it's a chance to revisit work you've done, and maybe it's your first chance. But I always begin here with crafting a personal leadership mission statement. And this should articulate your own uniquely personal sense of mission. And here are the instructions. So begin with the phrase, my mission is, distill the essence. This shouldn't be a 5-page essay. You're really trying to get to what's essential. And I invite you to think about the qualities of character you aspire to embody as you walk the path towards achieving your mission. You know, courage, integrity, like how do you want to be? It's not just what kind of world do you want to create. That can also be in there. But, you know, how do you want to be as you walk the path? And I invite you to think about focusing on soul, not role. And the idea is all of us fill many different professional, personal roles over time. Hopefully we express our mission through those different roles, but ideally our mission is deeper and not essentially connected to those roles. And, you know, I did a lot of work with politicians, and it's really clear in politics, there might be times where you have to risk your role to have integrity with your soul. So it's really important to be clear on this is my mission. That is not just about being, you know, a congressperson or whatever. And, you know, it's about who you want to be. That's what we're inviting you to think about. And the one story I like to tell before giving people a chance to do this is I've done this with thousands of groups, and I got to do it at a business school a while ago and had them do just what you're going to do, take a few minutes to reflect. And at the end of the reflection session, one student raised his hand very enthusiastically and said, I want to read my mission, which is a little unusual. And he said, I'm going to be a billionaire by the time I'm 40. Which was very audacious. You know, everybody kind of laughed. It was so simple and clear. But I said, you got to go back and take another pass at this, because the question is, as you walk the path towards that goal, are you going to be an amazing mentor who lifts up everybody and leaves everyone you encounter feeling seen and heard and respected? Or are you going to leave a trail of human wreckage and just be a jerk as you walk that path? Because that's what we're talking about. You can be a different person on the path. And this is an invitation to think about how you want to be, not just what you want to achieve. Make sense? Okay, 4 minutes. Give it a try. See what comes up for you. Okay, that's 4 minutes. No worries if you're not totally done, but hopefully you got to start on something. So let's discuss. How is that? What's it like? What's it like crafting your mission statement? Easy, hard, fun, terrifying? Let's get a little sense of what the process was like. Feel free to jump in or drop something in the chat.
It's easy once you define the system within which you're thinking about the mission. At my individual level, I want to be a do-gooder, but in a larger context, you know, I work for a for-profit organization, and there's a clear rift between my mission and the mission of the context. It's much like a constrained optimization in a system of constraints. So what's your answer or guidance?
You know, sometimes for people doing this, they get this kind of clear sense that there's some misalignment. And I can't go too deep into it right now, but let's hold that. Let's hold that, and we'll see what by the end, if you have some new insights into that, Ravi. But I appreciate your speaking up here. Let's hear from a couple more folks. What was the process like for you? It was easy. I see. A gift to be able to reflect in this way. Anybody else willing to say something? And, you know, people have very different experiences with this. There's no one right way to do it. Carrie. There you go.
Okay, I just needed to find myself on the board. No, I mean, I think it was an easy exercise for me just because I've been thinking about this kind of stuff a lot. So this was really good timing to have this webinar available. And my mission is to have the courage to continually learn and grow as a human being while also helping others do the same. I bring love, light, acceptance, poise, calm, and fun to all I do. So that's my
Beautiful.
thing.
Had you written it before, Carrie? Is this something you've?
I just fired that off now,
Okay.
but I mean, like I said, I've
Been thinking about
been
it.
ruminating on this
Yeah.
for quite a while. So
Great.
it's
Great.
all coming together.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else feel moved to say a little bit about what the process was or how this was like for you? Anybody find it hard? Done this before, new insights doing it this time. David, you willing to say anything about that? But what was kind of new?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like this, I don't know if others have the same experience, but I feel this aligns very much with who I am and to be someone who thinks about their ultimate purpose and vision. And so when we introduced it, I was like, yeah, I think I know this. And then as the time went on a little bit, I was like, oh, I've never thought about it in that way before. I've never thought about putting it into those terms. And I think that shows some of the change in me that, as you said on that previous slide, we are each moment in time, we are on a stage in a journey.
Yeah. And, ideally a mission, it's not something that changes every day, but it certainly makes sense that, you write it and a couple months later, feel like the words don't resonate the same. You need to update it. And that, it's okay to update a mission. What's not okay is to ignore this for a year or a decade or a lifetime, to just not be focused on this. So big fan of the phrase challenge by choice in this work, which means I'm not going to compel anybody to say anything they don't want to say. And I know Carrie has already generously shared her mission, but is anybody else willing to tell us what came up for you with your mission? Recognizing you only had 4 minutes and it's a room full of strangers. Anybody willing to give it a go?
Max, I'm glad to give it a go.
Awesome. Thanks, Deborah.
So my mission is to work with leaders to cross the ontological gap. And what I mean by that is to find that intersection of our formation with leading intentional change. For me, that means that there are going to be core practices that I seek to embody: mindfulness, compassion, hope, and joy. And who do I want to be? I want to be Mother Willow, which comes from this old story of this ancient figure that's just rooted and holding the space for others.
Clearly something you've thought about before, Deborah.
Just a little.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Anybody else feel moved? Anybody else willing? Going once, going twice. Any thoughts on what it's like to hear mission statements said out loud? What does it evoke to hear this stuff? Thoughts on that? It's inspiring. Yep. Noble, beautiful, warm and fuzzy. Lots of good stuff. And it's a little bit of a rhetorical question, but just imagine what the world would look like, what our companies would look like, what our communities would look like if everybody on this call just woke up and lived their mission every day, right? Imagine what that could look like. So it's a beautiful place to be, and I love hanging out here, but we've learned the hard way. We can't just hang out here. It's a beautiful place, but there's another piece of work that we have to do, and we're going to turn our attention to that. So in order to really work with wholeness and lead with wholeness, we have to turn our attention to this. We talk about owning our shadow. And here's what that means. Light and shadow always coexist. This is just truth. If you're in a pitch black room and you can't see anything, and somebody lights a flame, the light and the shadow spring into existence at the same moment, right? And they're related. So the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. So if you're going to talk about a flame and purpose, we need to recognize there's light and shadow to that. And every light casts a shadow. And if we want to strengthen our light, which is definitely the intention of this work, then we have to confront our shadow. We have to do this work to take a look at this side of ourselves. And this is really informed by Carl Jung, who I'm sure some of you are very familiar with. He wrote a lot about the shadow. And one of the things he says is to confront a person with their shadow is to show them their own light. And the idea is we actually don't fully know ourselves until we've done this work. We have a kind of incomplete understanding. And, you know, I've done this so many times, and I've actually seen a lot of times where people go back and rewrite their mission after taking a look at their shadow, which is exactly what, like, they just have suddenly a deeper understanding of kind of who they are in their wholeness. And the reason why I'm so committed to this right now, especially, is Jung says that if we don't do this work, if we don't own our shadow, then what we do is we project it out onto some other. And we see in them all the traits we refuse to see within ourselves. So some other who is violent or untrustworthy or, you know, mean, whatever it is. And this is, it is so much what is happening around the world, the dehumanization, the othering, the us and theming that is going on. And this work of trying to work with our wholeness is some vital personal piece of work we can each do to not contribute to that dynamic in the world in quite the same way, right? I'm just getting increasingly clear that this is the work we need to start doing so that we are not so stuck in this us and them dynamic. So I love mythology, and I also find that this idea of shadow is a little hard to wrap your head around. So I like to spend a little bit of time using myth to understand this stuff, right? And so here's this book by Joseph Campbell, and I mentioned him before, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, where he kind of first shared this idea, this finding really, that there's this pattern underneath all of these seemingly completely different stories told around the world. And he says some beautiful things about myths. He says, myth is the secret opening through which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos pour into human manifestation. And it's an exciting thing to think about, trying to connect with some of those energies at this moment that is so complicated. And he also says, when we understand them properly, myths become transparent to transcendence, which is just this beautiful idea that says they point beyond themselves to universal truths of the human experience. They're not what they may seem to be about on the surface, right? They're really illuminating these kind of universal truths. So I want us to try and access some of this ancient wisdom using a little bit of modern myth. So we're going to talk about Star Wars for a little bit, which may be very exciting for some people. You don't have to be a huge Star Wars fan because it's not really about Star Wars, but it is a way in to kind of understanding this and shadow and how it all fits together. So mythology. Well, here's George Lucas, you know, and he's the guy who wrote Star Wars. And I wrote many drafts of Star Wars, and then I stumbled across The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And when I read that, I said, this is what I'm doing. And here's Joseph Campbell, who went and went to the Lucas Ranch and watched a bunch of movies in one day, and was basically like, this guy is one of my best students. So I share this to make it clear, like, I'm not inventing connections that don't exist. It's very clearly documented that George Lucas wrote Star Wars as a modern take of Campbell's work. All right. So in mythology, let's do the basic setup. How does it work? So there's a hero, right? And it's an individual who embarks on a transformational journey. Hero represents service to a cause larger than self and is idealistic and has empathy and is part of a team and cares a lot about confronting injustice, right? But this is a myth, so we all know how it works. If there's a hero, there's going to be this. There's going to be the villain. And in Star Wars, the villain is a human being who's become dehumanized. You know, a villain who's more machine than human, who engages in I-it relationships, which means to the villain, everybody is just an object to manipulate, not a human being with their own hopes and dreams. Just how do I use people to get what I want? Really driven by power and ego and ruled by dark emotions like fear and jealousy and anger, right? Now, here's another thing Campbell says is that when we understand them properly, myths actually illuminate an inner struggle. So the genius of George Lucas was to project this conflict on the largest canvas you could imagine, right? This becomes a conflict of galactic scale. But like every myth, it's really just a metaphor for energies that are inside each of us, right? So let's try and put on this new pair of glasses and read Star Wars and see what we can take from it. Y'all ready to give this a try? take a little trip through this myth and see what we can learn? All right. So like I said, these stories always begin with a departure. And, Luke, I had to go with the version when I was a kid. I could redo this with Ray and Finn and the whole crew. It all still works, but this is close to my heart. But Luke spends his whole life on a desert planet, very boring. And then his aunt and uncle get killed. He has to leave everything he's ever known. That's how it begins. And that begins the road of trials. And we discover pretty quickly we're members of an ancient tribe of warriors. And at first, the ways of the tribe are really strange and mysterious. And so the first challenge is a process of initiation where we are introduced to the ways of the tribe, right? So here's Luke for the first time using the lightsaber and learning about the Force. There's just a lot he has to learn about this stuff, right? And we encounter a pressing public problem and realize that we have a role to play in addressing it. There is this really, really big thing happening, and we're saying, I'm going to step into some responsibility to respond to this. And we also discover we have to resist entering a state of obedience and conformity where we just lose our humanity. It is possible to disappear into just blind obedience, but we can't do that. We have to walk a different path. So it turns out, and myth always talks about this, if we want to confront this challenge, we have to develop ourselves, because there's always this really clear connection between our own growth and development and our capacity to transform the world around us. And I know the Humanistic Leadership Association Academy is all about this. Like you all get this, right? And so in mythology, you get the encounter with the sage, with the mentor, and the hero's eyes are closed and the hero is learning. There are energies in the self that he hasn't figured out how to work with. So he's beginning to really cultivate some abilities to work with own inner qualities in a whole different way, right? And while we're doing this work, we're also kind of on the road of trials, encountering tests and challenges. We keep getting pushed past our known limits. We're doing hard things, right? And here's the thing, by confronting those tests, we transform the world around us a little bit, right? We do hard things. But also, by going past our known limits, we discover that we have hidden depths. We discover that we have strength and courage and wisdom and skill within us. It was always there. We just never would have known it or been able to use it if we hadn't kind of pushed past what we thought we could do, right? That's how these journeys work. So here's why I love using myth for shadow, because a moment arrives when we become so focused on the urgency of the public challenge that we neglect our own inner journey. Just like there's too much to do, I have to go take on these big challenges, and I don't have any time for my own inner development. And here's what we learn. So first, we're just not ready to take on this public problem. And here's Luke, who was studying with Yoda, but his friends were in trouble, and he's like, I don't have any time for this. I have to go save my friends. So he goes and meets the villain for the first time, and it turns out he is very easily beat. So excuse the gore, but this is Darth Vader cutting off Luke Skywalker's hand. He's just clearly not ready, right? But here's the other thing we learn, is we discover that the dark side is not separate from us. It's actually within us. And this leads to one of the biggest Hollywood moments, in history, which is the big reveal, right? The discovery that the bad guy is the hero's father. And that is some hard news, people. That is a crisis for the hero. And why? Let's take a moment here. What happens there that is so difficult? Anybody willing to offer a thought? What makes this moment so challenging?
I oftentimes think crisis arises when the basic underlying assumptions are violated.
Yep. Yes. Thanks, Ravi. Other thoughts? Michael, what do you got?
Well, those assumptions may be returning to, okay, I'm the good guy, and all of a sudden, damn it, I'm the bad guy too.
Exactly. Before this moment, the world is a very simple place. Like, I'm all good, evil's out there. I just got to go beat up the bad guys. It's really, it's really a simple thing. But after this moment, it's a much more complex reality where actually the darkness is a part of me, and now I'm engaged in working with a part of myself, which is just a completely different piece of work from just like believing in my own perfection and going out and, seeing all of it out there. But this is what comes through in myth all the time, right? The most difficult trial of our journey is the confrontation with the shadow within ourselves. And once you see it, you'll see it in movies and books and everywhere, So we have to rededicate ourselves to self-mastery, to personal development, with a special focus on working with anger and hatred and cynicism and dark emotions. And holy moly, folks, I am being tested right now in some pretty deep ways with how to feel anger without fundamentally becoming an angry person, how to experience cynicism without becoming a cynical person. This is some deep spiritual work right now, right? But this is the challenge. So we work with that until we're kind of able to be with it and work skillfully with the dark emotion so we can hold it in balance and use it powerfully. Right. So here's Luke at the end of his training. So he's finally ready. Right. And of course, everybody knows what's going on here. This is all just leading up to what everybody knows is going to happen, which is the final epic confrontation where light and dark encounter each other. Here we are. And so here's what we learned there. First, we learned the bad guy was never fully dehumanized. There was always this spark of empathy in the darkness. And for those who don't remember, this is the Emperor is using Force lightning to kill Luke Skywalker, and Darth Vader suddenly realizes Luke is his son, and he picks up the Emperor and throws him into the abyss. So there was always this empathy in there, right? And the second is that reconciliation of the dark and light sides of the Force is not only possible, and so here's Luke seeing the human face of his father for the very first time. Here's the thing, it's the whole purpose of the journey. Like the entire story arc is about somebody who kind of goes through the darkness and arrives somehow at this place of balance. And there's this really clear connection in the movie that when we can find balance within ourselves, we call forth balance in the universe around us. And it's like it's really not about spaceships and aliens and all of that stuff. It is about this journey to finding balance with these energies within the self. And remember, Campbell says it's all a metaphor. It's all just a metaphor for these energies, which is why we keep telling the story over and over and over again. So it's time for us to do a little bit of work looking at our shadow. And we do this with our shadow mission exercise. And it's an invitation to own the shadow side of ourselves. And it's connected to our mission, because remember, light and shadow are related to each other. So our mission statement articulates our highest aspirations for who we want to be. Our shadow mission asks us to look at the choices we make if we choose not to live up to our own aspirations, which is, unpleasant, uncomfortable to look at, but that's what we're doing. So time for me to share some of my work. So here's my mission. My leadership mission is to practice courage and compassion and honoring and helping others to honor the sacred interdependence of our worlds. And I wrote it during a really powerful personal growth experience, probably 20 years ago. And I wrote it before I got my job at City Year, which was an AmeriCorps program with thousands of young adults doing a year of service. And pretty quickly, I was able to say, we need our core members to be doing their mission statement. And we were able to make that happen. And, it was helpful for core members. But when I was at City Year, the organization made this really bold pivot to saying it was going to address the high school dropout crisis, trying to show that young adults doing a year of service could actually move the needle on a public problem, which was so exciting and bold and ambitious, and really great to be in an organization that was being that courageous. But it also just ratcheted up the pressure. Like suddenly core members needed to do tutoring, needed to get trained in how to do literacy tutoring and math tutoring and behavior management and how to use data and analyze data and track data. And it was just a lot. And the dark energy kept kind of growing just because the expectations were growing, the intensity of things were growing. And I kind of started to feel like if we don't find a way to talk and work skillfully with that dark energy, it's going to undermine our effectiveness. So here's my shadow, which is to practice cowardice and disconnection in dismissing and helping others to dismiss the sacred interdependence of our world. So if I'm not being courageous, I'm being cowardly. And if I'm not being compassionate, like trying to bring things that I think can be helpful, then I'm just disconnecting. And I'm just saying, somebody else will figure this out, right? So I was really torn. I was afraid to bring shadow to everybody I work with. I didn't want my colleagues to know I had a shadow. I didn't really want to be known with this kind of wholeness by professional colleagues. And it was just scary. But I kept looking at my mission and my shadow and saying, well, are you going to choose courage or are you going to choose cowardice? And if you think this is helpful, are you going to try and be compassionate or just disconnect? And that is what shadow work does, is suddenly you can see consciously and clearly, so what is the choice before me? And what does it mean to align with my mission or my shadow? And, that's what Jung says. When we make this conscious, we're suddenly able to choose in a very different way around it. So I did it, and it was really gratifying to see how people found it helpful. And now it's kind of central to my work. I do this stuff all around the world now. So it's been amazing to see. So, all right, it's time for you to take a look at your mission and then craft your shadow mission. And here are the instructions. Start with the phrase, my shadow mission is. Articulate the choices you make if you choose not to live out your mission. And here's a really important thing. Think about shadow as what happens if you withhold your light, not what happens if you spread darkness. So if you have a mission to spread love in the world, your shadow would be to withhold love, not to spread hate. I'm not worried about people turning into cartoon supervillains, but the possibility that we just kind of choose a path of ease and least resistance in ways that are not about bringing our light to the world, always very possible. And when you're done, it should feel really uncomfortable. It's not pleasant to look at this. That means you did it right. And you should say, I recognize that person. I am that person, which is the power of saying, I'm going to have the courage to take a look at this. All right. Does this make sense to folks? Yeah. All right. 3 minutes, a little bit less time. Give it a go and let's see what you come up with. Okay. That's 3 minutes again. No worries if you're not totally done, but hopefully you got a start. So let's discuss that. What's that like? Easy, hard, fun, scary? Carrie, what do you got?
Okay, so a little bit kind of easy still, because like I said, I've really been wrestling with this.
Yeah.
And I have been trying to dig into my shadow.
Mm,
So this
okay.
is a little scary, but I'm going to share this with you all because
Wow.
this is
Okay, stepping right in.
okay. My shadow mission is to be fearful, ignore what I know is right,
Mm,
feel superior and materialistic, look for recognition and praise, while becoming more and more disconnected, discombobulated, uncentered, feelings of anxiety, hopelessness, and depression.
wow. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
And one reason I do this work is I hope it helps us all hold ourselves with compassion. Part of the idea is if we're human, we have a shadow. We all have this. So, Carrie, thanks for sharing this thing. And everybody here has one as well. And I hope it just lets us hold ourselves and each other with a bit of compassion. Because often there can be like shame and judgmentalism around the fact that we're not perfect beings of pure light. But this is just what it means to be human and to walk the path of trying to work skillfully with it. So, thanks. Thanks for bringing that right out, Carrie. Other thoughts, reactions to this? I see Joel says scary, but I realize I bring about the shadow all the time. That's kind of the idea is, once you see it, if you did it right, you're like, I know that person. And by looking at it consciously, we can hopefully choose not to go there with a little more skill. Any other thoughts, reactions to this?
I'm struck by how driven by ego I become. I'm more worried about how I look.
Yeah. Yes.
Than being in a place of servant leadership.
Exactly. Yep. When we're at our best, we're really serving others, but the shadow is really about self-preservation and our own hungers for power or love or control, whatever it is. Yes. So again, you are not alone. We all kind of grapple with that. Yeah. Other thoughts, reactions?
For me, I kind of, as I look at my shadow, I don't think, as you said, it's not about creating this cartoon villain that goes around deliberately harming people.
Right.
It's this idea of this person I could never be. And it was surprising for me as I drew a version of myself that was definitely a shadow, definitely not where I want to be, but realistic. I was like, oh, that's easy for me to become. Like that,
Right.
like that's just right there. It's almost like that's the way the hill is going, and it's easy to roll down that hill.
Exactly. It's like the path of least resistance. I'm just going to choose ease and comfort, and to see with real clarity. So what kind of world am I calling forth if I let myself slide into that is hard but important. And again, Carl Jung's whole thing is the more conscious we make this, the more we own it, then the less it just influences us beyond our awareness, right? So appreciate that. What is the wisdom of living our mission and not our shadow in this crew? Any thoughts on that? That is, of course, our intention here, but how do we do it?
It's all about expectations. The expected consequences are positive in one and negative in the other. So you follow the right horse.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. And Ravi, I really liked your story about the two horses. It's a great myth for how to work with this. Other thoughts? I can choose to be my best self. Yeah, and part of the idea, Joel, is to write your mission in shadow and forget it is not helpful. So the question is, how do we stay present to this? How do we think about it so that it actually animates our choices during our days? And yep, continual awareness, Carrie. Here's another question I'd like to ask. What relationship should we cultivate with our shadow? If we all have it, how do we relate to it? Shadow dance, love this stuff. Acceptance.
I think the shadow itself is a great learning tool. It's like a mirror. You do not want to be that. So it's a source of knowledge. The negative image is always good to know so that you can kind of stay away from it. So it's a source of knowledge. You can't just totally ignore that because it's a source of knowledge.
Yep. And, again, the idea is if we haven't done this work, if we haven't looked at it, then we just see ourselves as all good and all the darkness is in somebody else, right? But when we've worked with this, then we can actually kind of skillfully hold ourselves with compassion. And, I always like the idea of treat our shadow as like a loving parent. Like it's part of us. We love it. We actually need it. That dark stuff is, it's part of the wisdom of the yin yang is that it's part of what we need to be human, but it shouldn't be running the show, right? We get to choose who is in charge, you know? So I guess any other questions? What's alive for you as we come to the final few moments here? Yeah.
Good question. So sometimes I feel I stop between the two extremes. So one extremes and the other extremes. I try to stay just between moderate position, not
The
the
middle path.
extremes.
Mhm.
Just a middle, work on the middle of the two extremes. What relationship should we see the shadow and the light and the moderate position?
I mean, I love that idea of the middle path. And, one of the reasons I do this is my whole career has been in kind of the nonprofit world. I've met a lot of people with just unbelievable senses of mission and purpose, like beautiful, noble things, who haven't done shadow work. And so they love humanity and they're pretty horrible to their fellow humans, right? They're too far out there with their light without having done this. And I hope it just makes us, I like the phrase humbition, which is a blend of humility and ambition. Of let's recognize we all have this, we're all doing this work. We should be humble about our humanity, and we also shouldn't play too small and not, and disconnect from the noble things we want to do. But to really walk a path of trying to create change while being conscious of this is I think, what we're called to right now. I think we are seeing everywhere the problems of not working with this skillfully. Hope that answers your question, Ken. Yeah, and there's all wisdom traditions from the Buddha and all over the place. Is the middle path is the right path, to not go too far in either direction. Humility is key, but I find, yep, good stuff. So a couple final thoughts as we get to the final minutes here. So we brought some difficult stuff in. I appreciate your willingness to go there in an hour, and I know Shadow is inviting into the conversation some hard stuff at a very dark time in the world. So I do invite you to briefly take a look back again at your personal leadership mission statement. And just, the wisdom of that yin yang symbol is that light and dark are both true and real, and our light is as real as our dark. And if we feel like we're getting too much in our shadow, let's reconnect with our light. And if we feel like we're getting too, high on ourselves and too focused, let's remember that we also have a shadow. And just that ability to really be with our wholeness, which is just stunningly beautiful light and some pretty dark shadow. And all of us are human, and that's what it means, and a final thought: one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that's from Carl Jung. And that's so the intention here of, let's look at this and own it so that we can work with it skillfully and really just increasingly clear, like we have hit the limits of our ability to solve our problems without being thoughtful about this kind of inner work of holding our wholeness. Because the reason the world is so polarized outside of us is because we are polarized within us and haven't figured out how to work skillfully with this. And so one more thing, if you like this, I do a day-long training called the One Day Mindset Shift Intensive that goes through this and multiple other things. I'll just say, like, this is one piece of a bigger kind of shift in mindsets. And if anybody's interested, don't hesitate to reach out around that. It's stuff I'm really trying to bring out into the world. And I guess with that, David, do you have any closing, any
just to say thank you so much, Max. I found that enormously enlightening and helpful, and I'll go away and reflect on this further. Thank you all to those who are participating. I'll put a link here in the chat to our webinar series. We've got 2 more English and 1 Spanish webinars in our current series, so do check that out, and a link as well to Max's website too. But all of you on this call, thank you so much for being with us. It's been great to have you, and thank you as well very much to Max for leading us through that activity. Thanks,
folks. Hope it is of service. It was great to spend time with you all. Be well.